Thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the House Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee. For the record, my name is Representative Jonah O'Ryan Wheeler, and I represent the towns of Peterborough and Sharon, and I'm here today to introduce Constitutional Amendment 19. So you might be asking and looking at your text for the bill, Representative Wheeler, what are you doing proposing that we put cannabis into the Constitution? Is the Constitution truly the place for where drug legalization should go? And to that, Madam Chair, I would respond by saying 1975, in May 17th, 1975, the Alaska Supreme Court had a case before it in which they decided and determined that the citizens of the state of Alaska, via the privacy provision articles of their state constitution, determined that the people of the state of Alaska have a right to simple possession of a modest amount of cannabis. And so since the 70s, that has been the reality in the state of Alaska. And since then, about 12 states have moved forward through the constitutional amendment process, including New Jersey and Missouri and a whole host of other states that aren't necessarily liberal dynamite states, have moved forward on proposing legalization through their constitution of a modest amount of cannabis, because they see this as an issue that is debated a lot in their respective legislatures, but ultimately should be determined by the people of the state. So in proposing CACR19, that is the same methodology which I see the New Hampshire legislature should move forward on. We have been debating this particular topic ad nauseum, and it is a perennial issue which every time it comes up gets more complex with the regulation of sale and the use in public and all of these different other policy little bits and pieces to the overall arching issue of cannabis legalization. What I see is that the people of the state of New Hampshire consistently over the course of that time that we here in the legislature have been debating and debating and debating these perennial bills, is that they are using cannabis, they're engaging with it in every way, which way possible. I mean, as people like to say, we're the island of illegality, and that's 100% true. Maine, it is 100% legal. Canada, it is 100% legal. Vermont, it is 100% legal. Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, Pennsylvania, Virginia, New Jersey, all these places are legal states. And so we are the island in the Northeast of illegality. And I say that not because it is a point of pride, but because I think we here in the legislature have, through those complexities and wanting to debate the specifics of regulation of sale and all this other stuff, left the underarching issue of possession legalization by the wayside. And so this very simply would put on the ballot in the next November election whether or not the people of the state of New Hampshire want to legalize cannabis. And I think it is, given where they are in the polls and where they have come out in support of the legislation that has been passed through the legislature, the very bare minimum that we could do in this legislature to put the complex issues that we seem to not be able to find a solution to the people. If they support it, they'll pass it. If they don't, they don't. And then the people who don't support legalization here in this legislature can confidently say, the people of this state do not want legalization, and it will pretty much end the issue from there. The way I see this constitutional amendment, either which way, if we put it on the ballot, it will cut off the continuing perennial complex issue that is legalization of possession. And I think if we put this on the ballot, then it'll be up to the people, and that is where we'll go forward from there. So thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I will take any question that the committee has.
Thank you, Representative Wheeler. I apologize. I do not have the bill in front of me. What did you have as the modest amount?
So it says modest amount because as has been determined when doing constitutional amendments and such, putting in a specific limit puts it into a bit of a it makes it more legislation than it does the constitutional amendment. When talking about the Constitution, we're talking about a product that people have used since the founding of this country and before. People like
So
Thomas.
you don't have a limit.
Well, there is a
In
limit. Modest amount is a limit that through different courts, somewhere between 4 ounces and 2 ounces of cannabis. That's what courts have determined, and modest is the more appropriate way to put it into the Constitution than
Okay.
a specific limit.
Okay, you said it was 4 to 8. Is that what you said? 2 to 4. Okay.
Is what courts have determined the word modest
Okay.
means.
And then just the other question, Representative, that I have, and I think there was a couple others real fast, is you had mentioned that, the question being, is this the right place, and is the Constitution the place to do it? Have you had any thought as to, if this were to move forward, what the book we may be opening up to just allowing more to come in? Actually, ignore that question. Never mind. Disregard that.
I was going to say everything takes 2/3.
Well, yeah, and you can't control what other people say or think.
It's
So
true.
please disregard that question. Representative Prue, did you still have a question?
No, you kind of answered it.
Okay.
Only kind of.
Modest amount. Yeah, let me ask a question.
Okay. Representative Prue, you're recognized for a question.
So, as we look at constitutions, that vagueness comes into play often and leads to a lot of court cases because it was so vague. One side is saying X and the other side is saying Y, and without a specific amount will lead that to a lot of interpretation and a lot of court cases I see. So perhaps you might think about defining that, would you believe?
I wouldn't believe that, because I had the same trepidation, and I pushed back when I was working with the lawyer to craft the text of this, and the lawyer said that it is more appropriate to put modest into the Constitution as a result of exactly what you're talking about, so that it can be litigated from there. And as it has been litigated throughout the country, the modest amount is somewhere between 2 and 4 ounces. And in terms of the protection from the mass quantity, if you had a member of the cartel come in through New Hampshire with 15 pounds of cannabis, that would certainly not be modest. And I don't think anybody with any cursory understanding of the dictionary would say that it would be.
Representative Scheer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Isn't it the case that the bill doesn't just say modest amount, it says modest amount of cannabis intended for their personal use, so that last part of the phrase, intended for their personal use, adds some modification to the idea of modest.
Yeah, you're referring to page 1, lines 14 and 15, and you're 100% correct. This only allows for, as the Alaskan Supreme Court determined in 1975, it's personal consumption within your private property. So you're not allowed to go out onto the street and flaunt your baggie of cannabis. You have the right to personally possess and use cannabis, but you can't sell it. You can't, that it's very limited to what it will use and allow.
Follow up? And if this were to become a part of the Constitution, this would not prohibit the legislature from establishing some system for regulating the sale of marijuana. Is that fair to say?
No, absolutely not. I've been frustrated by the incessant need for the legislature to debate the regulation of sale while leaving the possession legalization by the wayside, as I mentioned in my original testimony. And so I left regulation of sale out of this because I think it just gets into the rat's nest of having to follow the money. And I think people have been using and are using cannabis right now, and we should make it so that that gray area of legality for the many citizens in our state who cross, for an example, the Tingsboro-Nashua line, where right over the line there are 2 dispensaries in which I just went the other weekend to see. Almost every single one of the license plates in the parking lot were from New Hampshire. So I think it's just here putting in place the black and white legalization is allowed instead of allowing for the gray decriminalization that we currently have.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you.
Representative Muse?
Thank you for taking my question. Are there other places in the state constitution that you're aware of that that essentially enshrine a modest amount of a personal right?
Not off the top of my head, no. But there are also instances where the legislature does something new in the Constitution, and I think that this is an appropriate way to do that, as 12 other states have.
Representative Lascelles?
Thank you for taking my question. I understand a lot of states have gone down the road of legalizing in different forms cannabis. Would this change the federal definition and the federal legality, which in my understanding, cannabis is illegal federally? How do you resolve that?
That's a question that all of the 22, 23 states that have legalized have had to contend with. And I think the federal government right now is just looking at a situation in which the federal legislature is not necessarily moving forward on any particular issue, including cannabis. And so there is sort of a gray area of regulation. People who, it matters more, I think, when you legalize regulation of sale, because at that point, the banking for that particular business becomes significantly hard to do because of the federal illegality. Possession, the feds, as long as you're not, like I was saying to Representative Prue, traveling with pounds of cannabis that you intend to sell, is not something that the federal government will deal with in any way whatsoever. The simple possession crimes are state level crimes, and the legalization of possession here will not, in my reading of it, put anyone under the threat of the federal government.
Follow-up, Madam Chair? I understand there's a move in Washington to change the schedule of cannabis. Would that have any impact on this?
It wouldn't. As far as I understand, President Trump has moved for has already signed an executive order which moves the cannabis down to Schedule 3. I think that was the right move, and I think that it does help allow for research and makes the gray area of banking for those states that have legalized sale a lot less gray. But no, this wouldn't affect this at all.
Seeing no further questions, thank you, Representative.
very much,
Have a great day
Madam Chair.
today. Representative Howard?